Yeah. I don't know why not. Doesn't. I don't know.
We're live.
Hello.
Okay.
Thank you for coming back, even after a short lunch break. But the subject discussed previously regarding vaccination campaign all over the world, and also the status quo of vaccination campaign in Romania had a lot of questions, and of course is a hot topic in nowadays under the pandemic situation. But now we will move with this first session, afternoon session, to another hot topic. And it is about harmonization of clinical trials in EU. Latest updates related implementation of clinical trials in all over Europe, and also the status quo in Romania and Central Eastern European countries. Together with Mihaela David from PSI, we had the opportunity to discuss about this subject in May this year, when we celebrated the International Day of Clinical Trials. And since then, we are thinking to see what is the status after a few months, and especially before entering in 2022, when this regulation will come into force. First of all, let me again salute all the invited and distinguished guests. I will make a very short introduction because the time is short, and there are a lot of things to be discussed. So Mihaela David is a senior pharmacist by education with more than 15 years experience in the pharmaceutical and clinical trials industry. And she is responsible at PSI for coordinating regulatory submissions and related processes in multiple European countries. We have again here Prof.Dr.Robert Ancuceanu, our Presidential of National Drug Agency, past president, actually, after just a few days when he decided not to continue with the National Drug Agency, but still very prominent figure and in the space of clinical research and pharmaceutical. He is a university professor teaching pharmaceutical botany and cell biology at the pharmacy faculty in Bucharest, and a very, very true professionalist. We have again with us Professor Dr. Doina Draganescu, member of the National Bioethics Committee in Romania, and also the Dean of the Pharmacy Faculty. Since 2018, she's a member of Bioethics Committee, and currently as a Vice President, and she is involved in the evaluation of clinical trials application in Romania. We have Dr. Ana Chioti, Head of Division Pharmacy and Medicines in Luxembourg, Head Directorate, specialist in preventive medicine, epidemiology, public health and environment, nutrition and clinical research. She has developed the Clinical and Epidemiological Investigation Center within the Luxembourg Institute of Health. Also from Denmark, we have the Senior Advisor Clinical Trials at the Danish Medicine Agency, Lene Petersen. She has a background in a master in pharmacies. She's Senior Advisor at the Danish Medicine Agency, Clinical Trials Unit. Lene has been member of the Clinical Trial Facilitated Group, CTFG, member since 2008, and the Danish representative of the EU Commission's expert group concerning clinical trials since 2001. Dr. Stefan Strasser, Head of Clinical Trials Institute Surveillance, Austria. Stefan is a medical doctor and has been working for the Australian Medicine and Medical Devices Agency as a medical assessor since 2009. Currently, he is the head of the Department for Clinical Trials with Medicine at the Austrian Medicine Agency. Dr. Dagmar Chase, Senior Expert, CEO of Clinics Munich, Germany, brings over 30 years of experience in clinical research to the table and has worked on numerous global development programs. And besides developing and managing the CRO, she has always been concentrating on GCP-related subject matter, as was one of the first provider of GCP training in Germany. Katarina Kovatsova is again with us for discussing this important topic. Clinical trials expert for Ministry of Health in Slovakia. Since 2000, Katarina worked for contract research organization responsible for Czech and Slovak republics. Mihaela, let's go. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like first to share my slides, and then we will start the discussion. Just a moment, please. Is it okay? Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I think then we can move with the, with the presentation. So yeah, thank you very much, Christina, for inviting me again to discuss about this very important topic on our future in clinical trials in Europe, not only in Romania. So it is indeed very important for us to understand the status of the clinical trial regulation implementation in all the countries, not necessarily in our country, but of course we are looking on the developments on our side as well. What I have also presented in May at our joint event, was that this roadmap, this let's say heat map, this traffic light tracker that has been provided at a public event by the CTFG representative, who, as you probably know, is the expert group on clinical trials under the heads of the medicine agencies. And this important expert group, they collected feedback from all the member states regarding the several topics, several pillars of implementation on how to, can you hear me well? Collected feedback on these several topics, and these are very important because based on these pillars, we know how much progress was done and what still needs to be performed in order for the regulation to be enforced and be applicable in all the countries at the same time. This is the most recent information I have. It was published, as I mentioned, it was presented at a public event where the European Commission was also endorsed the event in February 2021. I have no, let's say, no public information data about this advancement and feedback collected by CTFG since then, but definitely we would expect to have developments and progress because as you probably know, in July this year, the official announcement about the CTIS meeting the requirements, CTIS database, meeting the requirements and going live in 31st of January 2022 was published in, this announcement was published in the official journal of the European Commission, and 6 months from that moment, everything will need to be in place for the regulation to come into force. So, yes, now everyone knows that the date is set, cannot change, is 31st of January next year. So we are only, let's say, 2.5 months ahead of this date. Definitely, as I mentioned at that event as well, we cannot make a very strict connection between the lines of this tracker with actual countries, because this is information that CTFG considers confidential. But anyway, looking at this heat map, we realize that some countries have done some progress even before knowing the exact date of the implementation, and some other countries were still doing activities and so a lot of other activities would still need some improvement. And this tracker, as I mentioned, collected information on the national law, on the structure of the ethics committee, of the organization of between the national competent authority and the ethics committee, on the pilot projects that have been done, on the fees that will need to be now collected as a single fee, whether there is a national IT system or not, depending on the country, and on the training. So all these safety aspects and the communication between and the joint assessment of the annual safety report that will need to be done under from now on under the CT regulation. So all these pillars, as I mentioned, are very important, and looking at this tracker, we would expect some improvements. That's why for today we invited distinguished guests from several member states, including Romania, to provide us with responses to some key questions, and to see what has been done, what still needs to be done in order for all of us to be prepared in approximately 2 months, as I mentioned. So let's say we should go, these are the most hot questions, let's say more general, but still very important to understand the way how each member state has been agreed on to organize and on to set up the communication between the competent authority and the ethics committee in order to release one single decision per member state. So I will read the questions, and then I will invite my my colleagues from the authorities and from the ethics committee to respond based on their knowledge, of course, and it is important to have a, let's say, more or less clear picture in each of the member states. So let's say the most critical question is, what is the status of the additional national legislation that would need to complement the clinical trial regulation at the national level, if there is such, in draft, under public consultation, or already published, depending on each member state? How, if this legislation address how the EC will cooperate or will interact with the competent authority in order to reach this decision, especially for countries where there are multiple ethics committees, how the ethics committee will be chosen, and how there is a random, let's say, EC assigned to the review, how the GCP requirements in terms of obtaining the EC membership and bylaws will be met. How the communication from now on between the EC and the competent authority will be performed in practice, whether there will be an national IT system or by email. If there is, of course, a single fee, how this will be split, if there are 2 different accounts where you need to pay, or how this been organized on the national level. And of course, some probably, if the colleagues can share whether they still consider outside the CTIS the communication on different channels still possible. For example, if there are some RFI, some requests for information that are not clear, whether the sponsor can still connect the contacts, that can still contact the ethics committee or the competent authority over the phone, or for additional clarification, because this is not clear in the regulation or in the additional materials that have been published by EMA. So I would like now to give the floor to the panelists, and to invite each of you to present your situation on the country level. Thank you. Lene, if you want to start, or
yes, I can start. Yes, I can start. Thank you. Yeah, the status in Denmark for the legislation is that it has already been drawn up. It has been ready since 2016, and right now we are having it has been published, but it's not coming into effect until the 31st of January 2022. But it is in process within our Ministry of Health and so on. So we will be ready concerning the legislation. And how will we interact with the Ethics Committee? We will interact. The Ethics Committee will be part of the part 1, and they will look into the protocol and our investigators' brochure as they do today. So we will have a cooperation there to, when we are reporting member state, they should also fill in the assessment report for the trial. So we have a very large of interaction with our ethics committee, and we are planning right now how we are going to do that in practice. And how to choose an ethics committee in Denmark. In Denmark, we have chosen to form 3 new committees, and these committees should only look into clinical trial of medicinal products. And how should you choose it? Well, it depends on when you submit your application. Then it's the first in line. It will take over the responsible for that clinical trial. So it's nothing to do where the primary investigator, coordinator investigators has his address. It's purely the next one in line.
Mm-hmm.
And
which has an available slot, right? Which
exactly.
has a... Mm-hmm.
Okay. Exactly. Yeah, that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
And the communication, we will communicate with the ethics committee within the CTS system. We will give them a subtask within the system, and that's the way we envisage to cooperate within the system. We will have an API to our Danish National Medicines Agency, and the ethics committee will also develop an API integrated system. So we will have keep the communication within the CTIS. That's what we see in Denmark. Maybe we will not be totally in place when we go live, but we are working on it anyway. Single fee, there's only one single fee in Denmark, and it will be paid to one entity, and then we will split it in some way afterwards. Yeah, and the communication between the sponsor and authorities outside the CTIS, as you said, it is not foreseen or it's not set. It's not mentioned in the regulation, and I think that's because the regulation, the Commission want everything to be within the
CTS.
The CTIS. Yes, that's correct. But of course, I think, and it's just because also you have to document what you have had at with communication with the sponsor, and the CTIS is the way to document that. But of course, I think if you call us up, we will of course take the phone and give some advice. That's for sure.
This is very good to know. Thank you, Lene, for clarifying this. Okay, anything to add at this stage? So Lene, are you still with us?
Yes. No, that's all I have for these topics. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Then I think we can move with another country, maybe Austria. Stefan, do you want to explain also what is the current situation? What are the status for implementation? Yeah. Thanks.
Happy to do that. So warm welcome to all participants. In Austria, the situation is very similar to what Lene has described. I will try to work out the differences. So our legislation came quite late. The public consultation finished this week. So it is published, but not yet in effect. And it will come into effect in time with the clinical trials regulation at the end of January. At the moment, it could be due to the legal process that it is a few days later. We are currently dealing with this situation, how to manage that and how to communicate that, but our legislation is in place and we will have it for the regulation next year. We know what it looks like, so the draft was quite old, so we have prepared for what is in the law, but it is not yet in effect. Interaction between the ethics committees. So ethics committees and the agency, we will have our own IT systems for our work. So we will both use the API to get information from CTS, but the working together will be again in CTIS. So we will be the decision maker, and for those who are familiar with the role models, we will be the submitters, so the responsible finishers of tasks for Europe. And in most aspects, the ethics committees will work as a preparer, so kind of an assessor, supporting our work, putting out in reports, answering considerations that relate to them, but we will do the major clicks. We will involve ethics committees in both parts. So part one, clinical and statistical assessment, especially will be done by the ethics committees. They will complete the assessment reports there. And part two assessment will be fully done by the ethics committees. Here they will also have in part a submitter role, so you will get the request for further information from the ethics committees themselves. They will look at the responses, and again, it's just the conclusion on part one and the decision over the whole trial that is taken by the agency.
Okay.
We have 5 ethics committees planned in Austria. These are the ethics committees affiliated with the major universities, and they already had the role of lead ethics committees, so able to assess a multinational clinical trial in the current legislation. So these will move to regulation ethics committees. There will be a steering committee, we call them the platform of ethics committees, where like the head of each ethics committee and the secretariat will be represented. So they will, based on a work sharing algorithm, decide who will take the next trial. So in a way, it's like that those with free resources and should take the next one. So like Lene said, there is no guarantee which ethics committee you will get. It doesn't depend on the hospital of the principal investigator or something else. Yeah, communication. Yeah, I already said that. So we will use CTS as a turntable for working. We hope to use this preparer concept. So the ethics committees will not get subtasks. As far as I see, they will have access to all studies that we have access to, and they will do the role within the role model of the CTS.
What about the fees?
Yeah, fees. There will be, of course, fees for initial applications, modifications, and safety reports, but the fee will only be paid to us, and we will split the fees for the ethics committees. It was quite a difficult process to set this up, almost as difficult as the assessment. And the communication between the authorities, as Lene said, we will not prohibit it. So if we are called, we will pick up the phone. If we get an email, we will open it. But 2 things are clear from a legal point of view: only what is communicated via CTIS is legal. And also for the cooperation, I have to, as an RMS, to involve other member states. I cannot make deals around the system. I have to give other member states the opportunity to comment on things, and this is to be done via CTIS. But communication will be possible.
Great. Thanks for clarifying this, Stefan, as well. So then can we move to Luxembourg? Anna, can you also explain how did you organize yourself within the within Luxembourg? Can you, Chioti?
Yes, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
okay, please.
I guess
Thanks.
you can hear me well.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you speak a bit louder, please?
Okay, I'll just increase the sound of my microphone. So normally you should be able to hear me better now. Yes?
It's okay.
Okay, so in Luxembourg, so it's more or less the same with what has been said earlier. So I'll just give a little bit of additional information. The specificity in Luxembourg is that we are a small member state, so it has an impact on the way we will build our organizational model to address the CTIS. So regarding the first question regarding the status of the national legislation, we are actually far behind. So we are still working on the draft, and we are making everything possible to meet the deadlines. The problem in Luxembourg we have is that we are currently also working towards setting up an independent medicines agency, because for the moment the Division of Pharmacy and Medicines which evaluates clinical trials, is within the NCA. I will not go into the details of the organizational model, but normally it's supposed, there is also a draft bill that is done in parallel. So the agency will be set up end of 2022 or beginning of 2023. So because we are in this transition period, we might have experience some delay in finalizing the national legislation to complement the CTR. So regarding the ethics committee, how we will be cooperating, interacting with the NCA, of course, in Luxembourg, we only have one national ethics committee, and everything goes through this one ethics committee. And there will be also interacting with the competent authority within the CTIS, and we have currently our model, of course, will probably evolve, but for the moment we are almost on the same level in terms of in the roles of coordinating. Regarding the communication between the EC, so we don't have an IT system in place. Currently it's by email, but of course we will try as much as possible to use the CTIS. It's also important in terms of traceability, and especially to follow up to meet the deadlines, the timelines that are set. The single fee will be, for the moment, it's one entity that will split then, but it might be due to changes because we will have this future agency next year or early 2023. Finally, regarding the communication between the sponsor and the authorities, I would answer the same thing as my colleague from Austria. We will, as much as possible, regarding traceability and also for legal purposes, use the CTIS. And of course, we still stay flexible. If there are any questions, we will of course take the phone and encourage everyone to trace official RFIs within the CTIS.
Okay, thank you for clarification. When you said that the competent authority is under the reorganization process, and which means that there will be some delays in the national legislation to be implemented in terms of the implementation of the regulation, and you said there might be some delays because of this reorganization process. Does this mean that you might not be ready by the time of end of January next year, and meaning that there will be no possibility to submit under the CTR in Luxembourg from the beginning? What?
Actually, regarding the CTIS, we make everything possible to be ready. So we have also contracted external people, etc., to make everything possible to be ready. But in terms of the text itself, the national legislation process, it will take a little bit longer. So we will be, I would say, in a kind of transition situation where, technically we'll be ready. But regarding, formalizing on national level, there are still some things that need to be adapted. But it's not many things. But again, it's difficult to I cannot answer on behalf of the Ministry of Health, because the legal people who are working now on the texts might have maybe some other information which I do not have. But of course they know the deadline, they do everything they can. But as I said earlier, it's really a small team, and we have several regulations and legal texts that need to be amended or changed more or less at the same time. So this time of the year is really quite busy. So but technically speaking, everything will be up and running.
But if a sponsor clarifies the requirements with you without having this national legislation, will this be allowed to add Luxembourg as part of the countries to participate in a clinical trial, even though the national legislation is not in place?
Yes, actually, what we do, we try as much as possible to be pragmatic, because as you may know, Luxembourg is a small country.
Yeah.
It's rare. We don't have that many multi-center medicines trials that also take place in Luxembourg, because the market of medicines is very close to Belgium. So it's usually BLux, and Luxembourg relies 95% of what is happening in Belgium. So I see the companies rather choosing sites in Belgium to run trials. And in some cases, it depends on the therapeutic area. If there is a need to have a site in Luxembourg, then we will advise on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, I see. Now it's clear. Thank you very much, Anna, for all these details. Then I think we can move to Slovakia. Katerina, can you also share your input, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. That I must say that actually we had the legislation from 2018, but right now the legislation, we are simplifying the legislation, and this will become in force from 1st January 2022. That this is to our legislation. We are ready in this place. With the legislation, it's also it's in line with the one fee. Actually, this fee will go to state, and it doesn't, right now we do not have the rules how this will be splitting between the competent authority and to the ethics committee. If the our competent authority is ready, yes. Maybe you know that I was the head of the clinical trial department and national competent authority from 2018, but later on, because I'm a developer, that I moved to Ministry of Health, and actually I'm responsible for the ethics committee on Ministry of Health, because we will have just only one ethics committee. We are finished that I'm for sure that our competent authority is ready for clinical trial regulation. Our ethics committee, it's quite not ready, but we are finalizing all the tasks, and we are in the educational process of the member of the or potential members of the ethics committee. From the 1st December, the minister will approve the status of the National Ethics Committee. It means for Slovakia that we will have one ethics committee for the clinical trials, and we developed the ethics committee according to the clinical trial regulation, that we really would like to cooperate with the patient organization. That actually right now we are focusing on the patient organization. We are looking for the volunteers who will be cooperate with us. That, for example, when we will have the oncology study, and in oncology we will have the study for colorectal cancer, we have the patient organization for the colorectal patients, that this patient will be educated how to review, for example, at the informed consent form.
Yeah, the document
for example, some other diagnosis, that we would like to really implement the patient organization to ethics committee process. And right now we train them, and all ethics committee will start to first work in Slovakia from 1st January 22. But the master trainer cooperate very close with the National Competent Authority. And actually right now we are really very close communication with the National Competent Authority to set up the processes, and how we will be continue, and how we will be creating the assessments for part 1. It will be in responsibility of National Competent Authority, and we as an ethical committee will be focusing just only for part 2. It means according to the clinical trial regulation article 7. That I answer on these questions, and how we will split the payment, I don't know.
It seems the most difficult issue to
yes, to communication. Actually, competent authority, they have their own system, And for the communication, we will be using as an ethics committee day system. Just we must set up our part. But generally, we will be use the clinical trial information system because the CTIS has this there some access that we can communicate also there. And also, as regulation required the transparency, that they require the communication via the clinical trial information system. I'm not able to say how the national competent authority will, if they will be cooperate also by the phone or by the email locally, but I think yes, because they are actually right now most cooperating.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Katarina. Dagmar, would you mind if you move next, please? And then we will leave Romania at the end to be covered by you.
Yeah,
Okay.
good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here for Germany. I will do my best because I'm not from an agency and not from an ethics committee. But I want to tell you that the legislation is already ready since 2016. So like in Denmark, and a few of the paragraphs are already in force. And this was necessary because we now have a registration system for ethics committees. So not all of the German ethics committee, which are 52 or 53, will work under the regulation. They had to register, they had to show that they have the infrastructure, they also have to have a certain composition. First time a statistician is demanded, for example. So these paragraphs of the legislation were already in force at the end of 2016. The registration process is finished. We know the ethics committees also we have like a randomization list for 1,200 trials for 1 year. And the ethics committees, the 36, are appearing on this list more or less frequent, depending on their capacity. So it's like a biased coin randomization with their capacity. And so we will have a system that an applicant cannot influence to which ethics committee. It will just be the next in line from this list. But when you submit a trial, you never know where you are in the list. So it is a randomization. This is very new for Germany because we had this very geographical affiliation or medical faculty affiliation. So that is certainly a big change for Germany. Ethics committee will take part in part 1 assessment, the scientific review, so risk-benefit analysis, also if a trial is a low intervention trial, and also the IB will be assessed by the ethics committees. The part 2 is purely with the ethics committees. So if they say part 2 is not acceptable, then the competent authority cannot overrule them. Although in part 1, theoretically, there is the possibility of overruling the ethics committees, but this is a very theoretical thing. But it is a bit different. The part 2 assessment by ethics committees only, and part 1, it is the cooperation. But here I would say there is a bit more weight to the competent authority. The communication is very much defined in detail. We have an ordinance, so how they communicate, and also in Germany we had a pilot project and over 300 trials from sponsors who volunteered to already practice the new system. Went through this pilot, and so I think there is already good experience. The reports are very positive about these pilots, and also it was extended to Austria. Mr. Strasser could probably also say something here. Of course, the majority of these pilots is Germany only, so like a mononational trial, but then with Austria. But if we have many countries, I mean, I think nobody practiced that so far. This is at least my impression. Then what else can I say? The fees, it's a single fee. We have the fees published since 1st of October, so very recently. This is the fee, the overall fee, but there is also a publication in this ordinance what the ethics committees would get. But this is like an internal thing. So for an applicant, there will be one fee. And it is very much dependent on how complex the protocol is. Is it a protocol like we had for many vaccine trials now, which goes from phase 1 to phase 3 in one protocol, or is it a smaller entity, so to say? So it's different fees. So they took that into consideration in Germany. But we know now the fees, so that's a good thing. I have requested information on the API. All what I learned is there will be an API and there is something going on. It's in progress, and so far it's not satisfactory. This is all what I've heard here. And the communication with the sponsor, also, of course, CTIS, but they will not drop the horn if you call as a sponsor. This is what, I told me. So,
perfect. Thank you very much.
Very similar. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dagmar. Then I think we can move to Romania. Professor Draganescu, do you want to start? Or Professor Ancuceanu?
I think that the agency will start.
Okay, then Professor Ancuceanu, take the lead, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the status of the national legislation, as we discussed also in the morning, we have a draft of a government ordinance, and this has already been provided to the industry for feedback. So this has been sent to ARPIM and the CRO organization. There is also a draft of a Ministry of Health order, of which my colleagues say that is ready in about 90% proportion. That might be a bit over optimistic, but yes, there is a working version. And anyway, I wouldn't be that much worried about the Ministry of Health order, because this could only be promoted after the ordinance is in force. Before that, at most, some informal assessment of the draft could be made, but it cannot be promoted until we'll have the ordinance, and let's hope that the ordinance will be ready by the beginning of 2022, because precedent with other legal other pieces of legislation suggest that that might not be an easy process, although this is a small piece of legislation and should, in theory, be simple.
Yeah, and this draft ordinance is now with the Ministry of Health, right? And which is the entity to approve and release it, right, in the official journals of the state.
I hope this has been sent to the Ministry of Health, because I sent this when I was in the agency. So I think 2 weeks ago, I received the feedback from the companies. The feedback was mostly positive, just some small observations and suggestions. And I asked them to be taken into account and then to have it submitted to the Ministry of Health. but I cannot say exactly now where it is.
If it is with the Ministry of Health or not. Okay, so
I insisted to my colleagues to have this sent to the ministry because I knew this will take long and I wanted to have it started as soon as possible.
Because if the ordinance mentions this order, then it needs to follow the ordinance in 30 days, and we need to have both the ordinance and the order by end of January. It means that by end of December this year, we should have at least the ordinance already.
Okay, that's not necessarily the case, because even we could even have, let's say, the ordinance on the 25 and the order of the ministry on the 26th or 27th. So if it is it's prepared and discussed, it could be possible to not have to expect 30 days. So that 30 days is a maximal deadline. So it could be shorter. The important thing is to have an agreement on it and have it approved by the ministry.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying this. Then can you also tell a bit about the how this document, the ordinance refers to, or thank you, in terms of the questions that are asked?
So the ordinance provides for the cooperation between the two entities, competent authority and ethics committee. At least as when I was in the agency, I think we have a relatively good cooperation with the ethics committee. We were willing to make the necessary adjustments, and from our discussion within the working group, they expressed the interest to also have a say on the part 2 of the dossier. And we have no problem with that. Of course, it will be important to avoid divergent decisions, but I think this should not be a problem, because in the end the interest is to be sure that the decisions are based on the same scientific data. Of course, as long as you have two bodies, it is not impossible to reach disagreements, but I hope that case will be rare, as it will also happen in other contexts. I mean, we have experience with different countries reaching sometimes different decisions, but most often different bodies in different countries manage to reach the same conclusion. So I hope that this shouldn't be a big issue. With respect to, of course, you don't have multiple ethics committees, and that's simple anyway. It's not the problem of the agency. But regarding the communication, I think that for the moment it will be made by email. We don't have a national IT system as yet, and this is, of course, in the future. I hope we will have a digital platform. I dreamed of digitalization, and I would have been willing to implement a digital platform throughout all the agency for all the structures and services and so on. But that is a much more complicated decision, because the Ministry of Health has some strategy of digitalization. They want to build a digital platform able to exchange data with the other key institutions in the health system, such as the National Medicines Agency, the National Health Insurance House, and also potentially other institutions. And for this reason, it would be unwise and premature to develop a digital platform, an independent digital platform, especially considering that the ministry has already expressed interest in building this digital platform. They propose to start with the catalog of medicinal product, the national catalog of medicinal product, because that is a key database for the pharmaceutical system in Romania. And there have been discussions on specifications on what different stakeholders expect from that database product, and around that product should also be developed additional digital infrastructures.
Thank you very much, Professor Ancuceanu, for all these details. If possible, we can also hear the position of the Ethics Committee by Professor Draganescu, please, if you can step in and also clarify a bit from your side. And then I think we can also move on the questions for the part 2, because they are more related to the Ethics Committee activities. And since you are the, let's say, only representative of the Ethics Committees in this panel, then I think we should also hear your opinion on this topic. So please, Professor Draganescu, if you want to present the position of the EC.
Okay.
Thank you.
So regarding the first questions, as we were working together with Professor Ancuceanu in the same working group regarding the legislation and the implementation of the European regulation, we had, I think that I can say we had the same ideas about how we can work together after the implementation, starting with the 31st of January. So I will pass, because we establish also about the fees, about the part of the dossier, how we'll correlate together, how we'll communicate. There are things that are established by the ordinance. And of course, there are discussions that are opened, and I hope that we'll have them regulated in the Ministry of Health order. Regarding the things that I see here about templates, we already discussed inside the ethics committee that we'll try to use the European templates, not to have as possible the Romanian one. So we will we'll try to use the same with the other member states. Also regarding all the documents which are dedicated to our patient, it's established that it will be the informed consent and the patient recruitment, things different that we'll have in January. Regarding the financial arrangements, we established to have just one fee with the national agency, and probably in the ordinance we'll have established how we will split it. I don't think that will be any problem with that. I don't know what else.
Can you tell us about the decision that was made, if it was made, any decision in terms of the clinical trial agreements, if there will still be required to fully execute it, or what is the current position of the ethics committee in this respect under the regulation, not in the current, let's say, legislative framework?
Well, there are discussions we didn't finish yet, and I don't want to say something that it's after that it's not put in force. So about the contracts, I think that maybe in the month in December we'll speak again. We'll have a meeting in order to see what is the best way to do, because in this moment, for me at least, it's not very clear.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you, thank you very much, Professor Draganescu. This is good to know. There are still discussion. Can we hear also the position of the other countries very briefly, because we don't have much time, whether the fully executed agreements are required by the Ethics Committee and the Clinical Trial Regulation Review Part 2? Can you, for example, Lene, can you explain how is in Denmark very briefly if the agreements between the investigator or the site are required with the sponsor are required as part of the Part 2 review?
Well, today it's only part of the agreement that has to be submitted. I'm not sure they have agreed upon what is going to be on the regulation yet. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
And for Germany,
I can say
it's only part. Yeah, it's only part, and there has not been any new communication. It is called essential parts, which is also the financial information, but not the full contract.
But without being signed, I mean, to wait for having signed to be submitted
no,
to
this. The signatures are gone, it seems. So when you do uploads in CTIS, it's not expected that things are signed. I mean, if they are, you need to think, can you put this out for publication or not?
Exactly.
Because we
it's another
have many
complication.
things which will be uploaded twice, one for publication and one not. But in general, the need of signatures is not there anymore. This is what I've learned.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Katarina, you also wanted to add something for Slovakia.
Yes, as I mentioned that I'm responsible for the ethics committee in Slovakia right now, that in 2019 we created on Ministry of Health the general agreement, and it will be on sponsor and hospitals, and we do not, as ethics committee, we will be not review the final agreement, but finally it must be uploaded, but it will be not the part which we will be reviewed during our Part 2 review. We will be mostly focusing, for example, on insurance policy.
Mm-hmm. And Stefan, if you can also add a few words in how is in Austria about contracts, and then I promise I will try to end. I know I'm a little bit late. I know. Thank you, because Christina.
Yeah, like ethics committees will review drafts, so also no signatures for us, and they will focus on insurance and compensation mostly.
Thank you. Anne, can you also add a few words about this, if you can, in what is in Luxembourg?
For me, it's the same as my colleague from Austria, absolutely the same.
So no need for having signed the documents to be submitted, because there is no reason for wait to have this bureaucratic process to be finished in order to have the approval. There are two parallel processes that can run, basically not to keep the trial to start because of this process, to have this signature implemented before the approval, and then all this start of the trial to be delayed, and of course not getting the prompt access to the patients to the medicine. So thank you very much to all of you for clarifying this. We do have a lot of other information to share, but probably there is good to keep them for another meeting. This was a fantastic discussion with all of you, and I really appreciated your comments. We did receive also a message from EMA. They also encouraged everyone to try to start the training program that is available on online already, because all of us, we should be ready to start working with this very early in 2.5 months from now on. So we encourage everyone from EMA and also from the Romanian Association of CRO to start doing the training to be able to submit under the clinical trial regulation in the CTIS. So thank you once again for your participation. It was a great discussion. Hope to see you at next events.
Thank you very much, Mihaela, and thank you to all speakers.